a player that I just don't rate, and I like Hatate a lot more than this player, but in terms of production and output, I'm starting to get Samurai vibes.
Possibly hot take alert here, but I think he's player of the year so far.
Oh.
I'd put him ahead of Kuhn.
Look at a routine 3-0 win in the Cup, or a 2-1 victory over Derek McInnes where he feels unjust. I'm taking that 2-1
a wee bit of spice to it. Celtic have got the biggest game of the season this Wednesday when young boys of Bern come to Celtic Park in the Champions League. We might have a bit of a striker problem, we might have a bit of a crowd problem, we might have a bit of a left back problem, but it is the January transfer window and we can talk about all of it this week on 20 Minute Tims. I'm your host Jamie and I'm joined by Melly.
Yes.
And Stephen.
Hello.
Feeling optimistic about this game coming up, Stephen?
Oh, it's massive, isn't it? It's massive.
Bigger than that.
It's bigger than that. It's large. It's the biggest game of the season, no doubt about it. Everything seems to be gearing towards this massive game at Celtic Park. There's maybe a little bit more jeopardy than I would have liked, given some... I would say that the Zagreb game was a bit disappointing. Could have put ourselves in a safer place, but how better to do it than to go out and gub a team at Celtic Park and get through it, as good as through into the next round.
See, when I'm talking about coverage, I'm talking about scouting podcasts, so you know all about what Celtic are up against. I'm talking about pre-match, I'm talking about post-match podcasts, I'm talking about writing and videos, and you can get it all at patreon.com/20minutetims or on Substack or on Apple, wherever you prefer to get your podcasts. We had young boys scouted, Martin Melly. If you want to figure out, hear all about that, as I said, patreon.com, so we won't go over it here again. No spoilers, Melly, but from listening to that podcast with Alex from The Athletic, who had them watched for us, I was left thinking this game, I already had a bit of fear about it because, as Stephen said, the Zagreb game, I thought we've made this needlessly difficult for ourselves. We should have really went for the jugular against Zagreb. Now there's something to play for in this game, and after listening to the scouting podcast, I thought this is really, really could be a tricky tie.
This is Celtic in Europe, isn't it?
It is.
It's the one where you look at the game and go, right, that's a team that have lost all the games so far, 6 out of 6. Home game against them should be the one where we go all excited to go there and win. And then there's a break between the Champions League games. They appoint a new manager. They change their style of play. And it all goes Celtic in Europe, doesn't it? So it's up to Celtic. Look, I believe we're a good enough team to go out there and beat them. I don't think it's going to be as easy as maybe first thought, but Celtic need to go out and do it. If you were to put us in this position 7 games ago and say, look, you've got a chance to win a game at home against a team that's lost all their games and it'll put you through, you take that all day.
Is there Brendan Rodgers said it was a generation. We've not been into the latter stages of Europe in a generation. So that's an opportunity for Celtic to do something. And I think it's that generational trauma that's got me that's got me worried. Like I'm looking forward to this game going, oh God, we're going to end up with Bitton at centre half. He's not even here anymore. Look,
it is the January window.
Well, it is true, yeah. Look, we're a good team and we've done well in some of these Champions League games, and I think it is just, as I mentioned before, that Zagreb, I was stunned by how meek a performance that was, and we just can't have that. We need things really to click, and the prize at the end of this game is huge.
Yeah, the Zagreb game was a bit of a disappointment, but we've come a long way that we can look at a Champions League game away from home and think we should have done better there. In fact, they were there for the taking, probably should have beaten that team. But with this new format, we spoke a wee bit about it last week, it presents more opportunities that if you have, in years gone by, if we'd drawn away to Zagreb, we might have been really disappointed with that and ruined the fact that that's put us out. But the new format presents us with another opportunity to put that right. But that was right in the middle of a time where, again, people don't like the words like slump or dips or anything like that, but it was when Celtic weren't playing all that well away from home. They had a couple of games in a row we were struggling to score goals on the road. And I know the Champions League is, the highest level we possibly play at, but that was a team that had a lot of injuries at the time. And on the night, I thought Celtic should have battered them. I thought, watching the 90 minutes play out, I think we should have beaten them. But again, it's noticeable progress that we're coming away from any games in Europe thinking we were the better team there, should have got more points on the board. So fast forward to young boys, are we in a better position now? I think so.
What do you think after watching the Kelly game?
Well, against KILMARNOCK, I thought there were signs of positivity there. I know a lot of people were a wee bit alarmed at the performance there, but I had a great time at that game. I thought it was a great laugh. Not perfect, of course, but Celtic created some amount of chances. On another day, could have put about 6 or 7 past a team easily. So you look at something like that and you think, well, it's wasteful. but it's players like Kyogo, Hatate, Kun, guys who normally are pretty. Hatate's not like lethal in front of goal, but he's been scoring quite a lot this season. And another day, those guys all scored, and we're talking here about how that was great preparation for a game going into Europe. But I thought they did quite well. It's quite an exciting game. So
I thought there was a degree of physicality that we could probably expect from young boys that Kilmarnock showed as well.
Yeah, and Kilmarnock in particular, I know that the scoreline doesn't really reflect a massive Celtic win, but again, it could have been more. But I found it quite exciting to watch Celtic being quite fast on the break, look really threatening as a breakaway. Kilmarnock played into that because they tried something different, something a bit Derek McInnesy. They played at a high line and kind of welcomed Celtic to run through and create a load of chances.
What else did they do? Because we need to mention this.
Are you expecting the same from young boys?
Well, no, I have never seen that before, and I don't think I've ever seen it again. And even I think Greg Taylor must have went,
well,
what?
Yeah. So
this guy?
So yeah,
7 foot.
That was mad. So we sit right on the halfway line, right, and I arrived basically bang on kickoff. So I walked right out that tunnel, directly onto the halfway line, and what was right in front of me, feet away from me, was that boy Joe Wright, who's massive, 6'4". I thought, that's their centre half. What's he doing in the right wing? And you could tell that they're about to kick off within seconds, right? And he's like, all his weight is on the front foot, and I'm like, he's going to charge us. So sure enough, they absolutely launched it up to their centre half in the right wing position. In fairness, he did win it because he's about 9 inches taller than Greg Taylor, right? But they won it. But within 15 seconds, Celtic had a massive chance straight through the middle while he's wheezing his way back into the
Pure
position.
ball, that,
so curious stuff from them.
You know, when you see when a player comes on as a sub and there's a wee bit of rearranging to do, that happened for Kilmarnock. So Danny Armstrong came on and was rearranging a couple of players. He came on in pretty much the same position, but he was rearranging which centre half had to go to the right wing when Kilmarnock had a goal kick. I'm like, Derek, but if you offer me, look, a routine 3-0 win in the cup or a 2-1 victory over Derek McInnes where he feels unjust, I'm taking that 2-1
a wee bit of spice to it.
Fuming again.
He can't hide it.
No.
He absolutely, and it's it's great for us. It's great fun watching him in the post-match.
We looked directly straight into the touchline and just seeing him roaming about the touchline, his wee trainers everywhere, and he was in Brendan's box at one point as well, going nuts at the referee. Like, Derek, the ref was poor for both teams, no just yours.
Yeah, it's no surprise there. So I watched the Kilmarnock game and I had a few takeaways from it. It was an entertaining game, but I said at the top of the podcast, even have we got a striker problem? Kyogo was busy and he set up the goal for Callum McGregor, like playing the space that Brendan wants him to play. But I think after the last couple of weeks, and you said it before we kicked off, because should we talk in the podcast about Adamida, about Adamida's getting on? Both the Celtic strikers I don't think are absolutely on fire at the moment, are they?
No, Kyogo's not really scoring an awful lot of goals. I know he scored a couple recently in that slightly augmented or adjusted position he was playing, where it wasn't quite a right winger. It was more a kind of inside forward. If it was like a 2003 version of Football Man or Champ Manager as it was at the time, he's playing the right wing, but the arrow isn't going straight forward. It's kind of arching towards the middle.
Was that after the podcast we basically recorded last week saying how he was leaving?
I think it was. By
the way, I still think that's going to happen. I still think it's going to happen.
He looked a little bit forlorn when he was being taken off. I couldn't tell whether he was just really disappointed with his performance on the night or whether when he was taken off, his head immediately dropped and he did a couple of 360s applauding all the fans, which I thought was a wee bit more noticeable than when he's usually taken off.
Is his birthday today?
Yeah, it's his birthday.
That's all we're saying on that. No, Stephen.
Confirmed he is 30. That's all. That's all for now. The strikers, Kyogo, and you make a good point that he set up a couple of chances, set up a goal, but he was setting up chances as well where he put several balls across the 6-yard box that were really quite enticing for anyone else, but what you really want is him on the end of those. So there seems to be a disconnect somewhere where creating chances, but Kyogo isn't really getting on the end of them. He should have scored that one where he was clean through. Well, not really clean through, but he took it quite early and just bent it around the post. But there was one where he went. There was Maeda actually went out on the left and he put in a cracking ball right across the 6-yard box. Kyogo was there, but he wasn't where you would expect him to be. It's just like it was almost like diet Kyogo, where it's not quite. You would expect him to be eating those up right on the right on the goal line effectively, but he just wasn't quite there. So there seems to be a bit of an issue with creating chances and converting chances by strikers. Ida comes on and there's again,
He's missing an awful lot, Adam. He doesn't. That's the problem.
As always, I can only speak for my part of the stadium. It may be completely different wherever anyone else sits. It's massive. I can't speak for everything that gets said. There's starting to be a few groans about Adam Ida. I'm hearing, including one. A donkey was shouted over my shoulder, and I thought the big man needs a goal. There's no doubt about it. We can make all the defences for him we like about how he links up play occasionally well, but I think he needs to score a goal. It is worth noting though that it wasn't so long ago he was the designated penalty taker. Had it not been for Arne Engels coming in and being really excellent with them, there was the one he missed, but the keeper was a good bit off his line, but he's been rattling them in. So if Engels wasn't as proficient at penalties, he would still have been on them. He might not have scored the 4 or 5 that we've had in that time, but there's every chance.
Is that enough?
Well, yeah, but I suppose if we make the case, a lot of people were keen to make the case for Engels that his goal involvements were very high, but that included 5 penalties at the time, so you would need to do the same for Ida. And again, he's not taking these penalties, and this is purely hypothetical, but there's every chance that had Engels not been as good at penalties as he is, Ida is taking them, and he's sitting here on 13, 14 goals for the season so far, which again isn't great, and you want him to be doing more and a bit more, ruthless in front of goal. But I thought it was worth noting that he used to take the penalties and now he doesn't.
Do you think Ida's got a? Look, I'm reluctant to throw the guy under the bus too much, but I think he is having a tricky season. And one thing that's worrying me, Melly, is he's getting into position and he's no finishing goals. He missed. Might be the Ross County game before that, but I just feel like he was about 6 yards out and he just didn't get control of the ball and it didn't go on target. And you think to yourself, it just looks like a guy who's got a loss of confidence, because last season, about this time last year when he first joined, he literally burst onto the scene. You know what I mean? He was coming off the bench, marauding at the box, bosh, header, goals here and there. Butland spills it, it's in the back of the net. He wasn't thinking twice about these chances, whereas now he looks like a player who's questioning himself a wee bit.
Yeah, that's probably it, isn't it? It's the old saying, he needs one to go in off his backside, doesn't he? Looking at him, I like what he's doing in and around the area. The same with Kyogo. I think Kyogo's link up was a lot better. I think Kyogo was more involved at the weekend there. But both strikers, it is a problem because your strikers aren't scoring, but your 2 wingers are absolutely banging them in and getting on the end of loads of chances. But if you're asking me, you want your strikers and your wingers to be scoring. So there is a wee disconnect somewhere in the team, because like I said last week, I think it was 10 or 11 games and only one of those games the player that's playing as a striker scored in those games. We're on to 12 odd games now. Ida's not scored in 12 games. So that is a problem. And it's going to affect his confidence. I think his link-up play is good, but as you say, when it comes to those chances, he probably is second-guessing and doubting himself. And Ida's not Albion Ayeti, who's come in for big money and just
God for that
hasn't
How
worked
did he
out.
get in there?
Well, if we had signed Ida in the summer and we hadn't seen him last season, you'd maybe be thinking, have we signed the wrong guy here? Have we wasted money? But Adam Ida, we've seen last year what he can do. He can score goals. He will score big goals. He scored against Rangers at Hampden, at Ibrox. He got winning goals away from home that dragged Celtic over the line a lot of the time.
I want him to go back and watch all these goals. Like, get your this is who you are, mate. Just have a wee. Don't do the.
Brendan's fond of that. That's what he done to James Forrest when he first came in, wasn't it?
Was it?
He sat him down with a wee DVD clips. I don't know if we still have DVDs. A wee clips of James Forrest and said, "Where's that James Forrest been for the last couple of seasons?" And then Jamesy went on his wee run.
Do the same with Adam. Show him all those clips for last year.
He scored against Bratislava as well, didn't he? Yeah. So he has got that.
Done it at every level for Celtic.
Albeit not the greatest, not the highest of opposition, but he has done it at that level. So you'd like to think that he could get himself back into the mindset of that. You also make a good point there. With the wingers scoring so many goals just now, it's not like this is a problem per se. It's not like we are sitting demanding, wingers, stop scoring. We want those guys to do it instead. We want to score 4 goals in a game, but you guys are the wrong guys scoring it. It's those guys that should be doing it.
Brendan Rodgers' argument. I think that's his entire argument.
Yeah, it's just an interesting quirk of how the season's going.
It was costing Celtic games.
Yeah, that's it. So it's just it's an interesting quirk of how the goals are being scored and where they're coming from, rather than it being an outright problem. But the thing is, football fans in general, I think they want their strikers to be scoring goals. by and large, it's not like we're sitting moaning about who is scoring the goals, because DAIZEN and Kuhn have been excellent all season, and a lot of players are having their best goal scoring seasons for Celtic. Guys like McGregor, DAIZEN, even Hatate is probably right up there as well. But there's no avoiding the fact that a lot of people just want their striker to be scoring, especially a guy who's come in, and it's not his fault, but try and avoid talking about fees where possible. But Adamida came in for a lot of money, and you're going to want to see a goal return for that, regardless of link-up play and how he brings others in and all that sort of stuff. That is all important as well. Big man needs a goal.
Yep,
it does. And if Kyogo does go, and I suspect he will, I think by the window Kyogo won't be a Celtic player. If we don't bring someone in, do you have enough trust in Adamida to lead the line, or could you potentially bring in a winger, play MAEDA through the middle?
Oh, I still, even if you were to do that, you'd need two wingers then for me, because we've seen recently how the drop-off when Kuhn or Maeda or both are injured. Celtic struggled. Kyogo had to go out wide and Ida was up top. Johnny Kenny's there. I'm not too sure on that.
Yeah.
So if Kyogo was to go, for me, you need a definite replacement for him. And I prefer DAIZEN out in the wide areas. He is good at finishing, but he's more of an instinctual finisher rather than that ruthless finisher. And if you're putting DAIZEN through one-on-one, I'm not too confident as I would be with Kyogo. I expected Kyogo to put that one away at the weekend. So, yeah, for me, it's a winger and a striker if Kyogo goes.
Listen, we were talking about Hatate there, and you said he's having a good goal-scoring season. This sounds backwards, right? And I can already hear the criticisms that I'm going to get for saying it. But see, I thought Hatate was quite good against Kelly, right?
Yeah, he was, yeah.
And that just annoyed me. Because I thought,
right.
I thought, here you are doing it,
okay,
right? And you've not done this thing for months. We see it, wee bits and bobs in the games, and honestly, I'm starting to get a player that I just don't rate, and I like Hatate a lot more than this player, but in terms of production and output, I'm starting to get Samaras vibes from him. A guy where he shows up once every 12 games, shows you that he's actually got a bit of something about him, and then disappears. You don't like the Samaras you could have in Cham. You could have that comparison.
Right.
Pass on Hatate, generous on Samaras.
You're probably right. You're probably right. But I just think I've become, as I've watched Celtic this season, I think they've got an excitement problem. I've spoken about this before. The lack of like Jota and the lack of Matt O'Reilly and that sort of exciting talent throughout the team that we're not seeing yet. It might arrive. We know we've got Kuhn, but in my opinion, he's not as good as Jota. We've got Engels, and in my opinion, he's not yet as good as Matt O'Reilly. I've also starting to think that Brendan Rodgers, something Melly said a couple of weeks ago, Brendan Rodgers has been playing about in the sandbox with other people's toys for too long, and I think we need to just give him what he needs to make this Celtic team in his image.
Full Brodge?
Well, not necessarily full Brodge, because that would bankrupt us. Brendanomics will argue that you need to go out and spend 11 million on Engels and all this sort of stuff, and 8.5 whatever it is we spent on Ida. But with the Hatate thing, I just think he's starting to pick and choose his games, pick and choose his performances, and he was a lot more consistent under Angerfeld. And this Brendan thing, I know it took him a while to click, but he's been here an awful long time now. And if you were to take Hatate's overall average Celtic, if you were to plot it on a graph, you do have some high points, but they're starting to disappear down the left-hand side of the graph as time moves on, and everything's a lot more average. And I think it's time to either expletive deleted or got off the pot for Rio Hatate as far as his Celtic career is concerned. I think if he's got any ideas of moving on or some big move down to England, but I just don't see it.
No,
I just don't know if you're going to turn up once every 12 games, and it might feel harsh saying this after he has had a good game, but it was him playing well that made me realise you've got this in the locker, and if you just turned that up, Celtic would be a much better team for it.
I thought he was actually really good against Kilmarnock. I know he divides opinion these days, and a lot of people I think are in the same boat as you, where they're kind of fed up with him a bit.
I think that's it.
I don't know if it's a kind of over familiarity thing, and people have gotten used to him being a little bit. Do you know what? It's gone beyond inconsistent now. I think it is actually.
His inconsistency is his consistency now.
Yeah. So it's you can basically. I'm not sure.
Let's just let it pass. Just let it fly.
It works.
Yeah, I know what you mean though. It's like you can set your watch by him being on the. He's inconsistent side of things rather than he was absolutely class today. He was absolutely top notch.
See the thing about inconsistent players, right? I think you're allowed to be inconsistent with, over a period of 10 games, 4 or 5 of those, or 4 of them, you're excellent, and 5 of them, you're normal. What we're getting with Hatate just now, I feel, is once every 12 games, he's brilliant, but maybe 5 or 6 out of those 12 games, he's anonymous. 1 or 2, you've left post-match podcasts going, Hatate was a shambles today, it was shocking today.
Particularly derbies. Recently,
His base level is so low, and his mid is quite low, and you get these occasional peaks of performance, but they're so few and far between. It's not inconsistent. It's like, you had that one good game that time. I mean, at the end of this season, going on current trajectory, you'll be. That sounds like business talk. That's blue sky. This Hatate thing
sounds like management speak, Jamie. And I know you hate that.
I do. So, but the end of this season, we'll probably point to 3 good games Hatate had out of 30 or 40. The way that things are going,
I'm so torn on it though, because I watched him against Kilmarnock and I thought, I'm no longer, after saying that, I found the game quite exciting, because I found that it was quite interesting to see Celtic hitting and looking dangerous on the break, and I thought Hatate was a major part of a lot of those. A lot of his passes don't quite manage it, don't find their intended target. Some of them do, and that's when Celtic are clean in on goal and creating really good chances. That's something that could benefit Celtic quite a lot in the Champions League. However, the other side of that is that making mistakes the way Hatate does, they're punished in the Champions League. Maybe not necessarily against young boys. I think that they're not a great team by any stretch of the imagination. They're not going to do what Borussia Dortmund, famous last words, they're not going to do what Borussia Dortmund did.
Please.
So I know that they're not to that level, but in the European stage, we've seen it so many times. You can say things like Celtic in Europe and all that, but what we mean by that is that the mistakes get punished ruthlessly, just brutally every single time in Europe, and that's when Hatate tips over into liability at times. Not always in Europe, but in the bigger games and derbies. But that's the fine line between being able to spring attacks and, well, one way or the other, or spring an attack for who, Chris Kamara?
So. One player I think has been quite consistent over the last handful of games is Arne Engels.
Yes.
Right? So if you take that, for example, would you rather 2 Engels and a McGregor in your team, or would you persist with Hatate? If the opportunity, if Brendan came in the summer and went, look, right, I've done it with Angie's players and I've done it with the players that have been here, but really, Hatate, we love you, but I need someone in there who's going to give me a 6 or 7 out of 10 every week. I can't have 3s and 4s and the occasional 12 and the occasional 1 out of 10.
There was a point when Brendan Rodgers first came in where we saw it, a lot of people thought, he going to fit into Brendan Rodgers because of his
didn't play initially, didn't he? It was Turnbull. It started
the start of the season.
Yeah.
He's sort of,
he's better than Turnbull.
Obviously, his inconsistencies and that way he can lose the ball slackly. That Brendan likes control. So if you look at it that way, I said the other week, I think it was time to move on a wee bit from these players, and I think Hatate's one of them. He's really good on his day, but as you say, Jamie, that's getting further and further from truth, really, to be honest. And if we had brought in Hatate at the start of the season instead of Engels, would we be thinking he's a good player? I'm not really that sure yet. And like you say, Jamie, I think it's one of these. I can imagine Matt O'Reilly and Kyogo linking up for a lot of goals. I can imagine that. I'm not seeing that right now in
You
Celtic.
don't need to imagine it, you can remember it.
Yeah.
Because we saw it happen a million times.
Correct. Remember's a better word than imagine. So there was no song called Remember. So I can remember those link-up play, especially in the Champions League, the Atletico Madrid game, and that it was great to see. Celtic are missing that creativity in there, and that's what Real Hatate's meant to bring. He's meant to be that guy that plays the balls through and Celtic finish off, but it's just not happening just now, and it's not been happening for a while, and on his day can be brilliant, but we're waiting for that day to come.
You said you had a good time at the Kilmarnock game, Stephen. There was a letter went out from the Green Brigade, as they are, on the north curve of the stadium. They sent out a letter to, initially I thought it was directed towards everyone, but I think it was just directed to people in the standard section. It says they want them to sing, be vocal, back the team, harass the opposition, clap along to songs and create more noise, stay until the team leaves to show your appreciation, keep your phone in your pocket, enjoy and contribute to the moment. I think the last one's a tough ask, as we're all absolutely glued to these dopamine machines in our hand here. You know, I was with you until you said put your phone away, but I'm glued.
You are half internet after all.
I am a lawnmower man. I'm plugged directly in. Listen, is it about time we had an honest conversation about the Celtic Park atmosphere, because there's been a lot of talk about it recently, and on some Patreon stuff we've done, especially the Friday phone-in, which is a fortnightly Q&A. If you want that, patreon.com/20minute-tims, get involved in that. We've been, with increased regularity, we've been getting asked questions about, I've been going to Celtic Park for ages, it's a bit stale, what can you think we can do to upgrade the fan experience and it just boost the atmosphere a wee bit? And you guys were talking about a game, was it the Bruges game? You said you went and the atmosphere was a bit dull, a bit laboured, a bit quiet, a bit subdued is the word I'm looking for. Got there then. And I've got to say, I agree. I think we need a refresh. We need a spark. I've said this before about Celtic Park, about some of the songs are rubbish, and some of the news player songs, no offence, they're crap, man. Some of them are a bit, they're a bit of a dirge, and they're not easy to get along with. But that aside, I think some of the pre-stadium match build-up needs looked at. I think we need a new compilation CD.
The Bruges game, I think, was quite bad. I think people kind of universally came away from that game. Obviously not everyone, but a lot of people came away from that game thinking it was a bit flat for a European game. And I think that's
circumstances to getting in there, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was going to come to that. I think it's only appropriate that we acknowledge the fact it was a nightmare trying to get in, and it was all very tense. Yeah. And while I can't speak for everyone, what I found, it was quite an unpleasant experience trying to get into the stadium. There was a lot of people jumping barriers because there was like excessive police and stewards and all that. There's barriers that appear that aren't at normal games, that they're kind of there for Champions League games. So it was all a bit tetchy getting in. And when you get to your seat, you're probably in a bit of a weird mood after what you've just experienced 10 minutes before. Does it overall ruin the atmosphere of the game? Unclear. I think it would be a stretch to say that, but it does contribute if you've had a bad experience trying to get into the game. But the Bruges game was a bit weird. It was a bit quiet, and I think that's acknowledged, or not specifically that game, but I think they've acknowledged in that note from the North Curve or from the Green Brigade that said even Champions League games are starting to get a bit flat. I think they're directly referencing the fact that maybe the standing section has gotten a little bit stale, a little bit flat in recent times. I think they directly say that. Not so much them, but they're imploring people who are in that section to kind of get involved.
I would say the same for the whole stadium as well. I think there's definitely a lull. I mean, look, tomorrow, Wednesday, that might be a completely different story because there's so much online and that so much on the line for that game. But I just think overall, there does seem to be that spark missing from going to Celtic Park in terms of general atmosphere. Some of the run-of-the-mill league games, Melly, it's like there's nothing going on in the stand apart from some moaning.
No, I can understand it. I think maybe that's why we said after the game, Stephen, and the weekend, we enjoyed it so much because it was a bit of jeopardy. It was a cup game where there was a chance that you could go out. Celtic played well, but let in a silly goal that allowed Kilmarnock to get back in the game. That played right into their hands there, and what the crowd got going after that.
Many chances as well, so many roles.
It wasn't as if it was one of those games where Celtic aren't creating anything and don't get the crowd going, and then the players, vice versa, the crowd doesn't get the players going, the players don't get the crowd going. So there has to be a bit of that. The Bruges game was a weird one. It was kind of, we didn't expect to rock up and win the game, but it felt like we should have done that. We were in a good place. We should have went out and played better. And then the Zagreb game as well. And we're seeing opportunities missed here, and I think it's going to be a lot in the start of the young boys game. If Celtic can get off to a good start and try and get on the front foot early on and pin them back, it won't look like it's one of those slow pedestrian games. Now, I don't think Celtic play like that, but there's a feel of that in the ground.
So nothing stadium wise. Everything's fine with the stadium. The song selections and all that's all right.
Coming on to that.
All right, I was a bit.
So that's what they can do.
Pinning all the blame on Brendan and his players.
No, that's what the players can do on the pitch, but what do you get for going to Celtic Park? You get given a ticket or a card and that's it. You're just a number on a seat after all. So there has to be more done from Celtic's point of view. Us as fans, maybe we need to do more as well. I'm not one for getting up and singing, but our bit's not really like that. And if it wasn't for the Green Brigade, sometimes if they stop, like when a song finishes, it's an eerie silence around there, and I found that a lot over the last few games. I don't know if it is that fact that we're so many games, it just felt like with no winter break this season, I felt like you've not had much to get excited about. Celtic game comes, that finishes, you've another one, and another one. You're not getting that when the international breaks comes after that. You're choking for a game. You're desperate for it. Winter breaks, we're sitting here going, I can't wait for Celtic to come back. We haven't had that. It's just been game after game. We've played Dundee United twice. We're going to be playing Dundee twice.
So you think there's
And we get Kilmarnock in the cup as well. It's not as if we've got a minnow coming along or a Falkirk, something different.
Yeah.
There's no been much changes, and I think that's all played a part. But Celtic need to really take a look at what they're doing. These songs, like when you go to Hampden for a final or a semi-final, it's brilliant. Do something different. And can you? The game was in the dark at the weekend. 5:30 kickoff night. You lubricated people about, so everybody should be ready to go for it. But when you go in and you get the Celtic song and all that, and then these disco lights pumping, it's a bit of contrast. It shouldn't be like that. We always talk about the Copenhagen game when we went and Tsunami was blasting away. There's got to be something different we can do, music wise, visual wise, to get the crowd going.
No, not a fan of Chelsea Dagger, Stephen. The Celtic need to you know who we should get? We should get that guy that has that Big Bomba Clat song.
Oh, is that again?
M.A. We should get Big Bomba Clat.
Definitely get him.
To kick off. Just get
the campaign starts here.
Get cringy viral acts to kick the game off.
Was that Lewis Saunderson, get him a hype man?
Yeah.
Look, I get all this. It's going to seem as like sacrilege here, but I do think some changes could be beneficial to the overall match day experience, because I think the stuff that is established has been established for a very long time. Even the likes of the goal music, which has kind of moved with who the players are. So you get Scooter, which is good for like a Kyogo, but again, it's tied to Ange and Abada as well. We have kind of moved along with those. Maybe a wee bit too much. Remember, they played Starman after Carl Starfelt scored towards the end of his career. But even that is so. It's like the Pogues. Dead singer, right? Dario G, Carnival de Paris, that is still playing at that from 1998. Fratelli's, which is almost 20 years old as well. It's all very samey these days.
Speaking of sacrilege, right? Nothing against it. There's a time and a place for it, but also the sort of singer with a guitar sometimes doesn't fit the sort of aggressive pre-match hype fest that I want. You know, that I'm looking for. Event, aggression, energy in the crowd.
Remember we get the Dropkick Murphys to play at the side of the pitch once?
No. But I don't remember that. But you know what, your memory suggests it. So I do think, I think at the risk of repeating myself, that I think the Green Brigade have touched on something. There's definitely a malaise set amongst the fans. I think they've done the right thing by sort of pointing it out, encouraging people in the standing section to get more involved, and I think we'll probably see that at the next game. I think as far as the wider stadium goes, Stephen, you've said plenty of times in the podcast, the Green Brigade do their thing in the corner, the boys do their thing in the corner. They're not responsible for creating atmosphere throughout the whole stadium. And I would be really interested to see if the results ever of the Celtic fan survey came out. There was questions in there about improving the matchday experience, if any of that comes in. So I think the Green Brigade did the right thing by bringing this up by issuing the letter, because it's touched on something that we've spoken about and that loads of fans that there seems to be a malaise about the Celtic Park atmosphere. Yeah,
and I've tried to kind of express this, but the atmosphere and the noise aren't the same thing. I've been trying to say this for a few weeks. So the Green Brigade and the boys do that. They contribute their bit. They make the noise, and that should in theory sort of kick on an atmosphere, but it doesn't always. In fact, it almost never escapes those areas, and that's what Melly just described. When it goes quiet, when they go quiet, the entire thing just falls. They are a kind of. It's like a constant Celtic jukebox that's on, like a shuffle playlist that's on. So there's constant songs, but the atmosphere is slightly different to that. The atmosphere is a more sort of organic vibe that happens through the mood of the crowd, and that in recent times has been quite quiet. So hopefully the young boys game will be interesting, because it's a massive occasion, as we've already said, a massive game. So hopefully we can kind of somehow put it right and start getting it back to the way it was when everyone's legendarily spoken about it. And by the way, I've just realised that I kind of came across like I had a go at Shane McGowan for being dead a few minutes ago. Yeah, what I was trying to...
It's not his fault.
What I was trying to illustrate was that it's a very old song.
Yeah.
I don't know why I described it that way, but unfortunately I did.
I think some of the songs... I mean, for weeks now, I've been saying that we're missing out a Kyogo. It should be Chapel Roan, Hot to Go. Kyogo. It's right there. Have it. Nobody listens to me when it comes to song choices. We could get the Kieran Tierney song back.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's probably due a return, given that we've sold BERNABEI.
yeah,
Good night,
yeah.
sweet
Oh, good
prince.
night, yes.
Made a slight profit on him.
He will always have that time. Do you remember that time he was clean through, Buster away on a breakaway against Rangers at Celtic Park? He was about the only Celtic player in the entire half, and he cut it back to nobody.
See,
So-
that's what we need. We need him back, and he can roll it back to Kyogo. And he can go, there you go.
Do you know Greg Taylor's got a tattoo here that says bowling goalie?
Lane through it.
Aye, Laxalt. And he's in the day again. Bzz, 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 BERNABEI. There you go. Next. Well, underneath there, you're going to have to write Kieran Tierney. Real slugfest, that one. The other thing that makes me think the Kieran Tierney thing is going to happen imminently is that transfer dweeb and all-round weird dude Fabrizio Romano was reporting that Alex Vai might be on the way to Como. Kind of the way you would expect that to work, Melly, is Celtic have got him on loan for the season, and Celtic might communicate to Barcelona, look, we've actually progressed a permanent transfer in the January window, and that's why he's linked to Como. I can't imagine any other reason that Vai would be linked to Como, were it not be Celtic are communicating to Barcelona that they're going to probably let him go at the end of the window. And the reason that we would only do that, having sold BERNABEI, to me, is because we're bringing KT in. I don't see any circumstance where we let him go and just loan another, I nearly said rent a left back, loan another left back. I can only see it being KT related.
Well, Jamie, I think you will find that Liam Scales came on at left back.
Oh,
Well,
so that's, yeah.
You're right, they are
That's
right
them
there. Yeah.
Just rolling that one out, seeing how it goes, The Alex Baye thing's a bit weird, but when I look at it and go, right, Alex, would you like to go and live in Como and play under Cesc Fabregas? Yes, please. He's not really been getting a game for Celtic too much, has he? And he's kind of in a tough spot because he's never going to be the long-term left back for Celtic by the looks of it. Celtic have got Greg Taylor, who's decent, and he's more trusted than him, so I would have expected him to play more. I do think Baye will be a good left back for somebody. I'm just not sure Celtic's the place for him right now. So it's probably best that he goes off and plays more. And if he's going to do that at Como, it's a lovely place to do that and a great manager to work under. And if that's going to be the case, you'd think Celtic aren't going to do what they did last January and sell a left back and leave us with one, especially with Champions League games coming up. And it seems like if Fabrizio's even reporting that Tierney's a done deal pretty much in the pre-contract, you'd like to think all parties would get together and go, look, can we just do this now? But we'll hopefully in the next week or two we see things starting to speed up a bit in this window.
It's a bit of a low-key window, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
How long have we got left? 11, 12 days at the time of recording this. No, really brought in. There's no strong links. We might get TMT'd and somebody might appear tomorrow, as tend to happen. Brendan Rodgers said last week I expect something to happen in the next 2 to 3 days, but he loves doing that.
Aye.
He also said he didn't know what XG was.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, Brendan, you've got to be joking. There's no way he's just...
Him and David Turnbull, not a clue between them.
No.
Brendan Rodgers knows what XG is. He's absolutely at it. He's just dropping a whopper for the fans.
I know, that's going to set a cat amongst some of the pigeons, some of the specky pigeons out there. Specky.
Spat out their IPAs. Monocles
all
and
over their plaid
little
shirts.
beanie hats popping off people's heads left, right and centre. Boing. What? Sorry.
So it's been quite a strange window because I think the extended Champions League's probably influenced it quite a lot because Celtic are in a weird limbo just now where they're potentially letting go a lone left back in order to bring in a lone left back, potentially a permanent one. The striker thing, talking about Kyogo, that's been in the balance for a couple of weeks now. There seems to be a little bit of potential fire behind that smoke, but nothing's really happened on it. But that is because can't really let him go just now until the Champions League is over, or well, in fact, I was going to say I've got a replacement, but we can't register that guy. So it really is that we're going to have to. It's going to have to go as long as it possibly can, so that Celtic aren't left short here.
Might be Kyogo saying, "Look, I've got a job to do here for Celtic.
Yeah,
I'm not prepared to go until I've seen these last 2 Champions League games out or whatever."
Every chance, and if Kyogo is truly to go to MLS, I think that they've got a different window set up as well. I think that's extended till March or April or something.
Just
so
think
that could
we're
happen.
quick to criticise players, but there is a circumstance where Kyogo's the one saying, "Look, I've got one more Champions League game with Celtic. I need to do a turn for him. So don't talk to me about moves until that's done."
Yeah, and we can't go with it. Well, hopefully well, not hopefully, that's the wrong word to use, but maybe after Wednesday night, we're sitting here in a completely different position. We're in a really good spot with the Champions League, and that's when the ball will start rolling. Some of these things, I don't want to lose Kyogo, but I've kind of come to terms with the fact that like someone is putting these stories out there. It's not just completely made up rumours, and that's kind of when you. With the Tierney thing, when it comes to Romano's desk, someone is putting that story out there. He's not just out there making it up. So there's been a lot of smoke around the Kyogo thing. I don't want to lose him, but I've kind of come to terms with the fact that it might happen based on the vibes around the place.
Atlanta reporting it. Based on MLS putting out a story to say that it's them.
Sorry, no, we didn't mean it.
And based on Brendan Rodgers being asked about it every single week and not saying, no, he's definitely staying.
Yeah. So, no, we'll maybe see an elevation towards the end of the window, towards after the Young Boys game.
Can't wait for the podcast in 2 weeks where we're sitting here with Kyogo and Bae away and we're going, Liam Scales and Johnny Kenny.
Well, but the striker thing, I suppose you mentioned it earlier on about DAIZEN potentially playing through the middle. I just wanted to make mention of him before we finish up this week. The possibly hot take alert here, but I think he's player of the year so far. I'd put him ahead of Kuhn.
Would you?
Genuinely, I know that Kuhn's story is something of, there's a hefty amount of redemption in that because he was a little bit lukewarm last season and he sprung onto the scene this year and has been absolutely phenomenal. But DAIZEN, it's just like he's got 15 goals this season, so he's best for Celtic by quite a long way. And I know some of the story about DAIZEN has to include, but I'm getting kind of fed up with it. But he kind of cross the ball, all that kind of. We immediately focus on what a player doesn't have instead of what they absolutely do have. And he is scoring a lot more goals. He's creating a lot more chances. The pressing he does is just otherworldly, to be honest. Like, we can never replace that, which is why I'm very careful about talking about these things in terms of we kind of need Brendan's team now, because there's a lot of these players from previous seasons. The Japanese contingent is still carrying Celtic quite a lot. I know that the idea would be to hopefully replace them, if not improve upon them, but in DAIZEN's case, I just don't know if that's even possible. And I think he's been... we've spoken about it in the past, about how it's not just the ability to press, it's not the ability to sprint, because you'll get fast players everywhere. The fast players, that's part of football. You can get fast players in basically any league. Oliver Burke was extremely fast, right? But DAIZEN's supernatural ability is the ability to sprint, recover, and just keep doing it over and over and over again. Hardly any players can do it to the extent that he can. And with him being a lot more efficient, a lot more deadly in front of goal this season, he's scoring that same goal over and over again. See that just wee inside left pass and just popping it into the bottom corner across the keeper. He's scoring that over and over again. So just wanted to make mention of the fact that I've been really impressed with him this season. He's an extremely popular figure anyway, but I think he's been phenomenal this season. And my shout just now, my lock for player of the year, if this continues.
It's he has been impressive. I've been impressed with Brendan Rodgers as well. Some world-class management at play last week. Martin Melly, I don't know if you noticed it. I was just thinking about that. You know how Brendan says he doesn't like XG? Do you think that's anything to do with Trump coming back? And getting rid of like the woke nonsense. He's like, bro, finally I can
end it now.
He's like, finally, Trump's home. I can stop kidding on XG. I've never liked it. Sorry, that was a bit I should have tried earlier on. World-class football management. Trusty, you were terrible. You get bullied. You were weak as piss. Yeah. You're 6'4". You have to win headers 1 week. The internet, we're never going to see Trusty again. Get prepared to see Liam Scales. Very next game, who's the centre back? Austin Trusty. Who's a good game? Austin Trusty. That is world-class management.
Trusty had a really bad game against Dundee.
It was
terrible game, which can be one of those games that you struggle to recover from, because we've seen it in the past with guys like Christopher Julian. It's always Livingston away from home, Lyndon Dykes. That's always the thing that carried him about, despite having colossal performances at Ibrox and against Lazio and all that. Yeah. So he was brilliant. So that can carry about if you continue to have those games. My main thing about it was, if it was the passing that let him down in those games, if he was passing it to Dundee players and they were going through it, I'd worry about it. But it was the things that I know he's good at that let him down. His physicality, his strength, his ability in the air. That was the things that let him down. That's why it felt such a bad game for him, because we can see that's his bread and butter. That's the things he's good at. So for me, it was the right decision to keep him in. unless there was an injury to one of the two, I don't see the point in bringing Scales in and starting up a debate again, whether it's Scales or Trusty. I think it's one of these things where they've built up a good partnership. We need to go and let it go. And again, it's that thing, because Cameron Carter-Vickers is so good and so consistent. Everybody beside him, if they have a bad game, it looks a lot worse because the guy beside you is absolutely brilliant. So Trusty had a bad game. I'm willing to notch it down to that. Just a bad game. Came in at the weekend, was very good again, and I think his passing's quite good as well. I just didn't see that from Brendan Rodgers taking them off against Rangers in the final, because Liam Scales is a better passer. I don't see that, and I think Trusty's a much better player and defender, and he'll be Celtic's main man alongside Carter-Vickers.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think it was right to criticise, or everyone was right to criticise Trusty's performance against Dundee. Was that? Yeah, it was alarming at the time, because it was proper like heads gone stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I totally agree that if it was a matter of technique, I would have been a lot more concerned. But I think it really was just one of those psychological blows where it's just, I've made one too many mistakes here, and I just want out of here. Basically, it's just one of those games. I think defenders are capable of that. Kasper Schmeichel had quite a uncharacteristically poor game against Kilmarnock in terms of his passing. So I think defenders are occasionally capable of that. It's how you respond. It's how you bounce back from that. And I think he did that quite impressively against Kilmarnock Trusty. So I didn't see the sense in just tearing it all up and sticking Scales back in there just now, because I think I've seen enough from Trusty to, it's been a bit of a journey with him, but I think I've seen enough from him to think that he's worth persevering with. Because when he first came in, it took him a wee while. It took him a wee while to kind of adjust, because I remember the conversations at the time that we were having where, he looks like he's a good player, but what we need to remember is he's spent a lot of time at Sheffield United, where it's one of the worst teams in Premier League history. It's going to take him a wee while to adjust to what it is Celtic are trying to achieve on the pitch, and certainly on the ball. And he did that, and I remember thinking, what I want to see, Trusty, is I want to see him in a performance or in an experience that involves just backs to the wall defending, put him under pressure. Not just that he's on the ball all the time, because he'll take ages to adjust to that, going from Sheffield United to Celtic. I want to see him defend. Then came the Atalanta game, and that was like, well, that's it. Here he is. He's arrived. Couple of little dips afterwards, but I think that it's worth persevering with him now, because I've seen enough to think that he's going to be a really good defender for Celtic. It's not like he's a developing player. I think he's 26 or something. I think he's maybe running about the same age as Cameron Carter-Vickers. He's running about the same age as Cameron Carter-Vickers and Alistair Johnston. So it's not like he's a young player who's about to get any better. But what I would have said at the time is that it's really a case of allowing him to adjust to what it is Celtic are trying to do, because he's never played in anything like that before. I know he had a bit of experience with Arsenal, but no first team from what I remember. So it was always going to take time. And the Dundee game was a bit of a low for him. That wasn't a case of, right, we can see what he's got, but we need to kind of give him time. That was just a complete brain fart, really. The whole night was just a disaster for him. So it was just a case of, we acknowledge that he didn't have a good game. He was getting bullied. I think Brendan Rodgers said that. He either said he was weak as piss or a waste of space. Take a pick.
Equally as bad. What would you rather, Brendan Rodgers? Would you rather Brendan Rodgers called you weak as piss or a waste of space?
Piss, probably.
Terrible. Right, and on that bombshell, on that weak as piss bombshell, we shall wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for watching. Thanks to all the kind people who leave nice comments down below us on YouTube. Thanks to all the bad people who leave bad comments and YouTube. And thanks especially to our patrons. If you want involved in that, patreon.com/20minutetims. We'll see you next week.